Hi, I'm Dr. Lori Barr, the doctor's mentor, and I am here with the amazing Michele Tindall. Now, Michele, I met in October of 2008. We were at a leadership summit from one of our mentors, Dr. Bob Proctor. Dr. Bob Proctor, listen to me. Bob Proctor, he acts like a doctor. He knows so much about how the mind works. He's taught us so much, and we've grown so much together because we formed a mastermind group that we have been in touch with each other weekly, on a weekly call, since October of 2008. And, you know, it's really interesting how you get to know somebody differently when you only have the sound of their voice to really inspire you. Michele lives in the Outback of Australia. She has an amazing success story of leaving the Outback, the hard pioneer type life. They didn't get electricity until what year? 1968? 68, got electricity. We're talking sheep land, dry, cold, hard Australia. This is not the tropical beach part of Australia, although she does that too now. And she's going to tell us about leaving that, being highly successful in network marketing, losing it all, and rebuilding it in both arenas. So she has her cake, and she eats it too with ice cream.
Welcome to the Doctor's Mentor Show. If you believe that medicine is an industry and not a profession, if you enjoy submitting complex reimbursement claims, or you would do another residency just for fun, be advised, you're about to be offended. You should probably leave now.
All this talk about mentoring doctors is ridiculous. I thought doctors learned to do everything better than everyone else the first year of medical school. At least that's the way they act.
If you love assisting patients with vitality breakthroughs, if the right to practice medicine without interference is important, and you want expert tips for practice freedom and profits to support your epic life, welcome aboard and prepare to be blown away. The Doctor's Mentor Show starts now. Here's your host, Dr. Lori Barr.
Tell us a little bit about what life on the, what do I call it?
It's a property. It's
on
a
the
ranch,
property.
yeah.
A ranch. Okay, so in Texas, we think we have big ranches now. Just remind me how big your family holdings were.
Our family holdings were 100,000 acres.
100,000 acres. That's big. Take that, King Ranch in Texas. And so, and how many head of sheep are we talking about?
Well, in the family holding, that was 30,000 to 40,000 in a good season.
Is a lot of wool. It's a lot of meat. It's a lot of lanolin and the wonderful smell of lanolin. If you've ever run around sheep, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And we're not going to even talk about sheep's personalities.
Today's topic: love.
What did being in that environment teach you about, what did it teach you that got you to be where you were in network marketing and where you are again in network marketing?
Okay, well, first of all, thank you, Laurie. How beautiful is this? You know, I'm coming from the Outback and we're sitting on the Tennessee River here in Florence in Alabama. So what a beautiful contrast. And, you know, I'm actually, for my husband and I, we're third generation, what we call graziers. And the distinction is, we can do a little bit of education on that, is that we don't dig the soil, we actually harvest the grass. So that's a special trade in itself, to know, you know, how to look after the land, keep sustainability. But the interesting thing is that I've watched my grandparents take up those holdings in the 50s. And when we talk Outback Australia, we're talking arid. So we're sitting on a pristine lake here, which is a river, amazing. So for me, when I think about that, I've watched the generations over this time now be where we could have a drought. We could have something that is like a boom and bust cycle. And what I got shown through all those years of resilience was, no matter what happens, you pick yourself up, you shake it off, and you go again. And I think, you know, that's the ability. It's when those times are flowing and you have abundance. It is the harvest of preparing, you know, for the dry times, particularly in our arid zone. But But in life, I think I've been able to take those stories and really turn that into, there's always going to be peaks and valleys, isn't there? And sometimes our best learnings come when they're in those valleys.
Oh, usually.
Usually.
The most growth. Those are the growth opportunities.
No, absolutely. So, when I look back now, and it's 15 years, so for us to sit here today, on 9/11, and I look at, my family's journey where we went from, in a partnership running 100,000 acres, knowing how to look after tens of thousands of sheep and to care for that, then to try our hand in this invisible operation of network marketing. My family knew we were crazy, absolutely knew we were crazy. So it was interesting to start that journey and take our children on an expansion around the world of really what we got in touch with was how to be able to show someone another way. We love the leverage. We love the ability to be able to inspire someone to step forward into changing their life, into being a better way. And we were always looking for economies of scale in what we did. And so I think that that's really what we bought into. And if I take it back to when we first started in the industry, we lived an hour and a half from any medical treatment, and we'd give a rich blessing to our eldest son now, who was born, came into this world highly allergic. So we started to look for alternative solutions, and so we thank him for, helping us enter into the wellness arena and finding this incredible message where we were never actually shown the whole story. We were allowed to view a product and teach and experience that, which was going to be a solution for him. But what we saw when we'd start to read these magazines, that people's lives were being changed, and in a way that in the Outback, it's not about whether you're going to clock on for 8 o'clock in the morning and you clock off at 5 o'clock at night. That doesn't happen. You clock off when the work's done. And so that's not really, that comes from, we drive our lifestyle with results. And then we take in the factors of the weather and the climate, and then all the government changes that get placed on us. And so that's one of the things that I think that I richly embrace in the ability to have been able to affect change and impact lots of lives now. And for us to, sit at the top of our game was really about this whole thing it's not about trading time for dollars. It really is about trading your time for results, and then being able to transfer those skills to teach another individual. And so when we look at that adversity now, my passion is to take people from that place of a mindset of an employee to now being able to transition into a life of, they're in their own business, but they're in a leveraged type of business, and they're in business for themselves. And the ripple effect is, I look at myself as a stay-at-home mum on that rural environment, to then being able to lead many people around the world with the same love and passion as if you're raising your children. It's unbelievable to think of, where that actually led us, and the life and the experience that my children and my husband got to experience on that journey.
So, doctors, at least in North America right now, actually face some of the same challenges that you guys did in the Outback, in that, we may be at the top of our game, but we have the government changing the regulations constantly. We have outside pressures encouraging us to value other things over the human lives we have taken an oath to protect, at least to this point in time, although there are some doctors that want to change that too, but that's another story for another episode of the show. And, everything you said just now about the work's not done until the results are there. Well, how did you phrase that?
We're trading our time for results in this industry, but in the Outback, there's no one there to say you clock on, you clock off. And even our children at an early age, if we had a pen full of sheep to draft and do things with, they knew the next meal wasn't coming till that little bit was done. Right. So that's a grounding and a mindset, I believe.
And that's very much what we see in medicine. You've got a certain number of patients to care for before you can take time for yourself or breathe or go to the bathroom or eat or whatever it is. It's the same thing. So what happens often, and I'm sure you've seen this in the Outback too, is people who perfect success in that environment may not understand how to transfer those skills to a new way of making success. So they get really comfortable at being successful. They're trading their time for money and don't realize that those very same skills that have honed them to be result getters could be applied to leverage their money so their money works for them, or that they can train other people to work for them in network marketing. Would you agree with that? Did you run into that when you speak about network marketing in the Outback, for example?
Oh, absolutely. Well, it's interesting because I think everyone faces that, when you start in the initial stages and it's family and friends and people in your community. I felt like where we were the lone fish swimming in a river. And it's interesting now to have watched that, a few decades later, that it's now coming of age. And so, I kind of felt like I was a lone voice, and we purposely had to relocate to a larger community to be able to, to grow that business and expand that. So those same skills, I think sometimes when it becomes your unconscious competence, and so the things that that doctors are doing on a daily basis, I now have to look at what I do as an organic way of being, because it's just so part of what I want to do to take someone to go from point A to a successful point. So are they the same skills? I think they are. I think that it's the unconscious competence on those skills that people don't know exactly what they're doing. So when you go to show that to someone else or teach that, my favourite thing to do was to actually tie someone to my hip and go train them. And I guess in the Outback, people would train young pups, with an older dog with experience. And so maybe that's kind of where the idea came from. But you can leverage off someone else's skills and abilities while you're learning and growing. And I think that's the lovely thing, that being education-based, I absolutely love the fact that where is it that you can go and learn something that no matter how many times you want to do it over and over, that's the value of how far you can take it. And that ripple effect of where it touches that many lives, I mean, that's the stuff that still gets me excited, because where does that happen, that kind of creativity and impact can be?
Right. So network marketing is one way that can happen. What she described there is really the whole idea of mentoring, tying somebody to your hip and showing them exactly what to do and then watching them do it. We learn this in medicine too. See one, do one, teach one. That's our whole shtick, right? So sometimes what I find in medicine, though, is someone will get so good at doing something that they really don't see themselves doing anything else. Do you ever run into those people who kind of think they might want to do network marketing but really are afraid to leave the success they've already enjoyed?
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
what's the very first step you take to show them that the success they've had in one arena will transfer? Like if I was to say to you, okay, Shell, I'm ready, sign me up, where would you go first?
I actually think that you might be a little bit more teachable. We say three things, like have a desire, have that willingness to make a change is one thing. The second thing is actually be willing to take those steps. But most importantly, what I've watched, which is really relevant to the question you've just asked, is have the ability to be teachable. So when your cup is full of what you know as your skill, to empty some of that out to want to learn new knowledge, I think takes a large portion of humility and a desire to do something. I would say, Laurie, that your power and your speed to implement would be a beautiful way that we could do that together. So I would expect that change of mindset would happen in super speed. Wouldn't that be fun to have that happen?
It would. Okay, get that? And wouldn't
would
that
be
fun? She's inviting me on the adventure. Did you catch that? Do you ever invite patients on adventures with you or colleagues? That's part of fun in life. Don't forget that. I mean, we're having fun today because of this relationship we created, and it's amazing how much fun we've had in the last 3 days. So that sounds wonderful. It sounds great. And I think the word that would catch every doctor in the throat is that H word you mentioned, humility. Because humility is not something that you associate with medical doctors and other professionals that are highly skilled.
Authority.
It's almost like sometimes, it's not that we don't want to be humble, it's just that sometimes when you're in a really stressful environment, somebody has to be the captain, somebody has to be the leader, and they can't show weakness in the moment of crisis. Or at least that's the myth, So I think getting in the practice of humility might be the very first step for doctors who are making that transition. So how, aside from utter total failure, which is also very uncomfortable for doctors because they're not used to failing, they've succeeded, they've passed all the tests, they've been going along just fine. Failure is very uncomfortable for doctors. So aside from just fall face failing, which is a great teacher in humility, wouldn't you agree? What else can we do to become more humble and learn, become a better student by emptying that cup?
And just to expand a little bit on where I was going with that humility, I have taken people from positions of status. Mm-hmm. And that's what I'm saying, where the humility really comes from. Because when you have got a position that this is how it looks, I feel that they struggled more in releasing that and were probably a little bit more stiff to take on that journey because that was everything. So their profession and their status really almost reflected who they thought they were. Whether that's accurate or not, it was just that there was a lot more to unpack in them learning to be vulnerable and it's okay to fail forward and let's go learn this together, because I guess that was one of the things that I've learned that, and I had to let go of very early, if you're not going to do it well, or don't do it at all. So that was some unpacking of my, beliefs and obviously early childhood things. So, in this business, you're going to learn and you are going to fail forward, and you're going to do it usually in an environment where it's so supportive. So what are the steps? I think for me, when I'm mentoring, I'm actually wanting to provide that element of trust. We're in this together. I'm here to bring out the best, and the skills are involved in getting the results, or one side of it. But for me, my passion is to help people grow their whole greatness. So it's a combination of a beautiful partnership where no matter whether they take those skills and go on to be the ultimate leaders in this industry, it's just an industry. But growing people is probably where my core is at. So it's beautiful to then bring all walks of life where you've had, like you just described, the end result in a person's life does depend on you. I guess that's a little bit more to unpack and move forward with, to let that go. Would you agree?
Well, but you touched on something else that's very typical in doctors, and it's that whole perfectionist. Mm-hmm. If I can't be immediately successful, do I even want to try this? Yes. That's the fear of the perfectionist. I know that well. I'm a reformed perfectionist here, so I can speak to this just like you are, evidently. Mm-hmm. And, I think really getting okay with it not being perfect and just moving forward and saying, okay, well, if I don't smile as much on this video, it's still going to be wonderful. And if I don't feel quite as comfortable, it's still going to be great. Yes. Because I'm being me. And I think that's part of the journey, giving up the perfectionism. And that's a big step, because most doctors don't even want to recognize that who, me, a perfectionist? Why do you think that? Mm-hmm. I very much remember when my mentor who called me out on that pointed that out, and I'm like, you're kidding, I'm not a perfectionist. She's like, are you kidding me? Let me show you the ways. And once my eyes were open to that, I could see it everywhere, not only in me, but in my colleagues.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I guess the same thing is that when we look at, we're too close. So the power of a mentor. And, I enjoyed such a beautiful experience with you yesterday as we went and viewed Helen Keller, and really, I'm sure you're going to share that with your community. The impact of what I saw in that as a powerful mentor, and then the freedom of bringing someone else out of the dark.
Oh yes,
that's heartful and so touching. Whereas at a level of what you're doing, and what I feel I have the privilege of doing, is taking someone, not only it's not the dark, but it's a bondage of how we think things have to be.
Yes.
And I think that sometimes when we have the courage to take that step, and I think that's where the vulnerability comes in. For me, when I was out in the country by myself and no one was there to mentor, I just knew, because I guess this is a turning point, having an understanding of a why. And I remember our second son, we all went on this journey together. We set a goal of what was going to happen at the end of that. And for our family, it was taking our children to the snowfields for the first time ever. And I just remember his eyes piercing me, that it kind of touched my soul, and I thought, I'm going to make this work. But as I went about the community in those early stages, it was like I would give myself a pat on the back if I started to implement the things that were needed to be implemented, because I didn't have that hands-on mentor. And I think the beautiful part about that is it's not an excuse. It made me stronger in the journey, because I don't have to say that. Jim Rohn, one of my favourite mentors at the start, used to say, if you wait for someone to show up, to turn you on, to get going in what you desire to do, what happens the day they don't turn up? Well, I mean, in the middle of the Outback, it's a long way for them to come to turn up. So I think in that resilience, again, what I'm saying, that, you know, that living on the land taught us, also inspired me to be able to have that look of my son's eyes, and knowing that as I'd go about my way and I'd start sharing that story, I would think, if they're coming on the journey, that's beautiful, but if not, I know I'm going to go there. And so do you realise what that means? It was like I had a real conviction why, but it was a beautiful invitation, but it was a driving force that I didn't rely on anyone else's decisions to stop where we were going to go.
Right. So she had a powerful why, and that powerful why may be a different one, but you've also used the powerful why to carry you through some injustices. I mean, frank injustices in different arenas that you've faced in your careers, both in the Outback and network marketing. And can you just describe, what did it take? How did you move? Because, you know, doctors face that too. You get sued for something, you know you're not guilty or whatever, and it feels like a personal injustice. So what did you do to get yourself past the point of feeling wounded or violated and really move forward with failing forward and moving on? Mm-hmm. And how long did that take?
I can hear a stuck moment there. And yet, you know, one of the things that we talk about growing people, it is all about the opportunity to develop, isn't it? And so that is the valley, and that is a moment of the most growth, and obviously I think the most times when we can gain wisdom. Mm-hmm. I would now say that everything happens for a reason, and that's certainly on the back end of it. I think sometimes we have to find that place. We talk about having a 20-foot view, 20,000-foot view, where you can elevate yourself out of it and try and get a different shift and a different perspective. And it's finding that inspiration in those moments, because I do still know that those, whether it's right or wrong, that it's an injustice that's done, and, you know, it can be an example for others. My passion now is to teach organisational culture, what can bond someone and bond a whole group of people in fear if you do one thing, you know. So that's something I'm very passionate about, you know, teaching and sharing for people, so that we can be preventative in those things and actually use these experiences and the hardships that our family went through because of those decisions, you know, to have it as a positive effect for other people. What did I learn? I learned that probably, again, my Outback thing is that sometimes you've got to just shake yourself off, and, you know, when it happens that way, there can be all those emotions of shame, or what right then do I have to actually lead people in another direction, and where is the safe partnership, particularly in this industry? Where is the safe partnership where I can fully be aligned with someone's vision and redefine an incredible industry that can still raise the bar and do it in a better way? I think I've come back stronger, I've come back wiser, I've come back free of any, I can still keep my heart soft now, and that's taken an incredible journey. You know, we hear about forgive and move on, but to actually practice that in the moment, I think that's probably where the courage really comes into. So I'm probably still in that process, but what I've found is that when I've now trusted again and moved forward and loving putting like a whole new group of people together to create this synergy of creativeness and magic, it's interesting that that's a healing process as well. Mm-hmm. You know, you get back on the horse and you start to ride again. I think that energy of moving forward and having to live out all the principles that you know make this work, I think that's probably been a gift that I've now started to unwrap again, and to have people that I can trust. I mean, you know, what an incredible experience to have that now, instead of it being at all perfect, and you know, it's life, it's not perfect. So yeah.
So we mentioned earlier when we first started talking about the mastermind group that we have, and one thing I'll say about the mastermind group is no matter what ups or downs we've gone through in the past 7 years, it's been a safe place where there's nothing but love and positive energy. And what it does when you're in those valleys, because when you're in those valleys, you've got the microscopic view. You mentioned that you subconsciously mentioned the 20-foot view. The 20-foot view is fine when you're in the microscope of self-doubt and the lack of self-confidence that comes when somebody, when you're knocked down, whether you knock yourself down, which we ultimately all do, or when you're knocked down by somebody else. The point is, you get really stuck close by. And by having this group where we created this safe harbor, this safe environment, and are routinely visiting it every week, it was a place to reinforce the good things, the positive things that other people see in you that you can't see in yourself for those moments that you're blinded by self-doubt. And I mean, that's my take on it. What's your take on how the mastermind contributed to just helping you in that process?
Fantastic you brought it up, because it was actually something would feed my soul. I almost feel remiss not to have brought that up, because I think when you're going through something and there's judgments being made, you will find out who your closest friends are, who your real friends are, and who actually believes in you. And so for me, having that weekly connection with people who I felt were having a consciousness on a much higher scale, we talk about the group we've put together now is deep in love and trust. I think what we have is very unique and very special. And to have had that build very slowly and organically over, 7 years has been amazing. So when in the middle of that time when I was going through it, I often say that it feeds my soul. So do I believe in the power of a mastermind, particularly with the right group of people around us, to love us at that time when we actually just might need, the loving and the hugging and the nurturing, rather than having to be out there creating something in your life. And so the other thing that just comes up for me when you were talking about it was we always used to say, remember, we're going to write this mastermind guidelines, which I think we still should complete. And what I saw is always be mindful of the energy you bring to the call. Yep. And I think whether it was I was going through that experience, it was something that I hung on to, because it allowed me then to realise that you take yourself out of thinking about how am I in this moment, and I'm about to connect and contribute to an incredible group of people that I do connect with at this time every week. And so you take the focus elsewhere and it becomes other people focused again. I think that's another benefit as well, because you are being responsible for what you do, as opposed to, the sort, sorry me, and that state. So for me, the mastermind is such an incredible community that goes so deep within. And I know that as, you've invited other people in there and that have experienced that, I mean, it's just this cocoon of beautiful, loving creativeness that's really at a high level.
Yeah. And just to take it full circle, when Shell brought up the Jim Rohn quote, and she talked about giving herself a pat on the back, ultimately in that mastermind, we're not creating something that we think we have to run to for safety. We're creating the ability to always empower our inner child with what we need when we are in those moments alone, because we still have those moments alone. Aging is a good example of that. You look in the mirror and, my parents, my mother has one of these mirrors that you flip and it's got the 10x view of your face, and I'm looking in that last night and I'm thinking, maybe I need to change my diet just a little bit more, and then it's your inner child that's saying, I'm the 2-year-old, love me no matter how I look. And I can do that for myself. And I think that's something that the more that you're in a safe place and can express yourself, in like we do in the mastermind group, it gives you the ability to recognize when your inner child needs something and to give yourself that love. And that's ultimately what we all need to do to be able to love others fully, is to be able to love ourselves and give ourselves that peace.
I think this is a message, really. and I think that's part of the beautiful gift that I've got at this stage. Of that journey, I really needed to slow down. When you start giving out for so many years and serving, a community of people, it was interesting that in me slowing down, it's actually some of the things that really, until we do embrace and love every element of ourselves, I don't really think that we can do that for another individual.
Right.
So that to me is like, this is a message really that we need to be able to value ourselves, and we talk about that. I talk about that with our children. You see that on an aircraft, put your oxygen mask on before you put theirs on. In network marketing, I used to say that swim to shore, and for me to swim hard and get to shore and then be able to throw life vests back to people. You know, it's that same thing, is that when we've really truly learnt to love every facet of ourselves, good, bad, or not quite so shiny, I think that's when we become a better place for being able to share that with other people.
So for you perfectionists out there, that's not just love yourself when you're at your ideal weight, eating the ideal things you're supposed to eat, and you're on vacation. That's loving yourself when you've fallen off the wagon and you're doing emotional eating. That's loving yourself when your thighs are 20 pounds overweight. Those feet and those thighs are still carrying you everywhere you want to go in life. Love them. Thank them for being yours and for having the use of them.
Your next step.
What are the next steps? If there's a person who doesn't believe they're a perfectionist, who really is, and they're thinking that they need to make some changes in their life, either personally or professionally, what would be their next step that you would recommend they take right now to know if they need to take action or not?
And one of the things that I've noticed is that noticing precedes change. And I think this is one of the things that we connect on is awareness and our love of that type of learning. And I think sometimes it's like when people don't, and you had that same experience, when you don't realize your behaviors and your ways, then sometimes it's just about monitoring yourself, monitoring your results for a month. Start to listen to the language that comes out of your mouth. People think they're positive, but sometimes that's not always the case. So I think that noticing precedes change. And that would be the call that I would say, is to take it in a very easy, simple way, but to be present in every moment of every day. That's like working a muscle that hasn't been worked forever. So that's probably a huge task to start with. But I think if you are seeking changes in your life, then depending on how great the desire is to make that change, I think that's the first part, is to really getting to know the things that you like, the things that maybe you would want to change about yourself. But yeah, noticing precedes change.
And what you might notice, if you're a perfectionist, is that you may not be able to come up with a way to measure what you want to change. And what that should signal to you, you won't change what you can't measure. So if you can't figure out a way to measure it, that's a signal to you that you really don't want to change that. Figure out a way to measure it if you really want to change it, because you will you will change what you can measure.
And it's baby steps, isn't it? It's
Yes.
baby steps, and they say inch by inch it's a cinch, and I think that's true. I think sometimes we look for those enormous changes, and that's where it becomes overwhelming. So, for me it was the same as that little pat on the back. I'm doing great. I at least took action. So maybe that's the thing, is that there is an acknowledgement of at least any kind of movement. And the other thing that I think is very important, which really goes back to our mastermind community, start to identify people that are in places where you may like to be, whether it's results, whether it's how they're living their life, and start to make sure that, they say that your income or the way you live your life is like the 5 people that you mostly associate with. So I think an environment that you actually can consciously set up is a really empowering place to have that osmosis be the change.
Awesome. All right, so let's wrap it up here. That was a wonderful conversation, and we thank you for joining us from beautiful Turtle Point Country Club in Killen, Alabama. Say goodbye to the Tennessee River, and we'll see you next time.
Goodbye.
There's more to explore at thedoctorsmentor.com.
Are you stopping at a hospital? Hello? Don't you know that hospitals are one of the sickest places on the planet? Don't touch anything in there and get out as fast as you can.